Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for this video, it's going to be episode 2 of my brand new Stephen King series. If you like this Stephen King book, then read the Stephen King novella, where I show you guys a Stephen King book. Could be a classic, could be a newer one, it could be popular, could be unpopular. But basically, if you enjoyed that Stephen King book, I recommend a novella counterpart, where it could be very, concretely similar, or it could be similar in one way or another. Either way, basically, if you've read, this certain Stephen King book, I highly recommend you checking out this novella because I think you would also like it. And like I said, this is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, I'll have the link down below. And those ones were like the most concrete, obvious ones I could think of. And for this one, these ones I also think are fairly obvious, or they make a lot of sense. And as the series goes on, it might be a little bit more wishy-washy, but I think it'll be a lot of fun. And definitely let me know down below if you agree with any of these, and definitely leave down below in the comments any suggestions for future videos or future King to novella ideas, because I've come up with a lot of them, but again, maybe I've looked past or didn't make a clear connection for some of them. So I'd love to see your opinions down in the comments below. But for this one, I've got 5 more examples of if you like the Stephen King novel or book, then definitely try the Stephen King novella. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. And for my first example, this is actually going to be a repeat book. It's a book that I mentioned in the first video, but I thought of another novella that this could work for. I think it makes a lot of sense. So if you liked The Shining, then try Rat, which is the last novella in his newest novella collection, If It Bleeds. And this one I also think makes a lot of sense because you've got these 2 writer characters, obviously Jack Torrance being very famous, but the character in this one is also kind of a disgruntled writer, and he's written some short stories, but he's never been able to write the novel that he's wanted to write. And it kind of has similar vibes because obviously Jack Torrance takes the job at the Overlook Hotel thinking that he's going to have all this time in the world to write this great novel, right? Obviously that doesn't go so well. And then obviously in Rat, well, not obviously, because a lot of people probably haven't read this one, but it's kind of a similar vibe where all of a sudden the character in Rat gets this, amazing idea for a book, and he wants to basically rent this cabin, in an isolated area, and he wants to just take his time and just write this novel that he's got impacted in his brain, or imprinted in his brain, and he wants to get it all out. And something interesting happens. May or may not be with a rat, as the title of the story suggests. But yeah, I think both of these make a lot of sense. Jack Torrance and the writer character in this, very similar vibes. They're going and they want to write this novel, and weird stuff happens. So I think this one makes a lot of sense. And for my next one, if you liked Misery by Stephen King, if you liked Misery, check out Gingerbread Girl, which is a novella in Just After Sunset. And the connection here is, pretty surface level. They both involve kidnapping. Obviously, Misery, if you're unaware of, or if you haven't read it, Paul Sheldon, a famous author in this, universe of King, is a famous author, and Annie Wilkes is his #1 fan. So when Paul Sheldon gets into an accident, Annie Wilkes rescues him. Well, she does kind of rescue him, but also she kidnaps him and kind of forces him to write a new novel because he was originally not gonna continue with the series that he's writing, and then she kind of forces him to. So yeah, it involves kidnapping. And this book, or this novella in Just After Sunset called Gingerbread Girl, also involves kidnapping in kind of a different way because I don't want to give too much away because it's a novella, and but it involves a woman being kidnapped. And I think what makes these two very similar, not only just the service level of being kidnapped, but I think they're very scary. And I think King is at his best writing horror that's realistic. A lot of the times you'll have stuff like Pet Sematary and It and stuff like that where I don't really necessarily find it scary, but stuff like this could actually happen, and I think it makes it all the more terrifying. And so both of these stories being grounded in reality and involving kidnapping, I think it works very well. This next one is also pretty surface level, and it's a pretty clear indication. So if you liked Christine, definitely check out Mile 81, which is the first short story in Bizarre Bad Dreams. And I'll just throw this out there. If you're interested in joining the Stephen King Short Story Book Club, this is actually the book that we're reading. We just started on January 8th, and the very first story in here was Mile 81, and pretty much everybody enjoyed it. So did I. And, very surface level, they involve killer cars. Christine, very well known for being a killer car story. One of my all-time favorite Stephen King books. Killer car, excellent. Mile 81, I don't want to spoil how it's a killer car, but it's a killer car. And if you really liked the killer car elements in this one, definitely check out Mile 81. I'll also throw out, obviously Christine is his more popular book, but From a Buick 8, I know it has its fans. It's not one of my all-time favorite books, but this does have kind of a weird, kooky, supernatural car element to it. So if you did like Christine or From a Buick 8, definitely check out Mile 81. King definitely has an obsession with killer cars. So if you like killer cars, definitely check out Mile 81. This next one, I think, is a very interesting connection. They're both very different stories, but pretty similar in some ways. I'll get to it. If you liked Under the Dome, this massive tome, that rhymed. If you liked Under the Dome, definitely check out The Mist, which is like a pretty lengthy novella that's in Skeleton Crew. I think it's like 120 pages. And these stories are very different. Like Under the Dome is basically about this town that gets trapped under a dome, and they don't really know why. They have to try to figure out how to cope and live under the dome. Very lengthy, very famous for having a very weird and not controversial, but a lot of people don't like the ending, including myself. And then you have The Mist, which involves, like the title suggests, this mist that kind of rolls into this town, in a small town in Maine, and all of a sudden there's these weird, like, Lovecraftian creatures that come with this mist. And so a lot of these characters in this book, the ones that survive initially at least, get locked up in the supermarket, and they're all kind of there, and they have to try to figure out what's going on and what to do and how to handle the situation. And both of these books kind of have this weird mob mentality where, you get a group of people together, and, you have to try to keep the panic down, but then there's also going to be people that are just starting shit and they're just, so both of these books kind of have that similar vibe of like, we have to try to figure out how to sustain ourselves and to not panic and to come up with solutions. And both books kind of have like villain type characters where like they're trying to, you know, rise up in the ranks and like become the leader when really they should not be. So I think even though they're different stories, like different premises, they kind of have different or similar vibes in that sense of like there's a lot of mob mentality and there's a lot of characters, a lot of character divides going on. So if you liked Under the Dome, definitely check out The Mist. And for this last one, this is a bit more of a loose connection, but I think it makes sense, and I'll explain why. Basically, if you enjoyed any Richard Bachman novel, you know, and I just have one here, Thinner, as an example, definitely check out the first story in Full Dark No Stars, 1922, and check out the the second or third story in Different Seasons, Apt Pupil. For me, you know, like Richard Bachman obviously has, you know, the 7 novels that Stephen King wrote under that name. But there's been a lot of stories that he's written that just have that Richard Bachman feel to them and kind of like a dark, sinister, nihilistic, you know, like they're just more gritty books. And for me, you know, like 1922 and Full Dark No Stars definitely has that feeling. Like he probably could have written this as a Richard Bachman book and it could have worked very well. Very similar thing to Apt Pupil. Like this just straight up felt like a Richard Bachman book. And like I said, Richard Bachman, they're different than Stephen King books. A lot of Stephen King books, even though terrible things happen to the characters, they usually they usually end in some kind of hopeful way. Like a lot of the times there will be some kind of, you know, something to look forward to in the future. But for a lot of Richard Bachman books, the endings are just brutal and they just, you know, there's no hope for these characters. And kind of the same thing with, you know, 1922 and Apt Pupil. If you're unaware of what these two books or these two stories are about, 1922, it takes place, you know, I think probably in 1922, probably. It's like in the 20s sometime. And it's about this guy who's most likely going to get divorced to his wife who lives on a farm because they're having disagreements about what to do. And, you know, he's wanting to off his wife and he's bringing his son along with him. And the son's very conflicted. It's very dark and kind of darkly funny and like a very nihilistic story. Very good. One of my all-time favorites. And then you have Apt Pupil, which is also kind of sick and twisted because you have this really messed up like teenager who finds out that somebody in his neighborhood is a hiding Nazi. And you would think, you know, a normal person would want to report that to the police and say like, oh, this guy's a Nazi, like arrest him. But no, he blackmails him and wants to know all of the nasty details about what he did in concentration camps. So like both characters are not good. There's no hope for anybody in this story really. And it's excellent and it definitely reads like a Richard Bachman tale. So if you like Richard Bachman, which I tend to like most of his stuff, you know, it's obviously Stephen King, but in writing in a different tone usually. If you like Richard Bachman books, definitely check out 1922 and Apt Pupil. That's it. All right, so this was my part 2 of my brand new Stephen King series. If you like this book, then check out this novella. And yeah, hopefully these make sense. Definitely the first episode were kind of like the crystal clear ones in my mind. These ones I think are also pretty clear, and hopefully you were able to understand, you know, my connections for these. And like I said, the further on we get, there might be a bit more sus. like really, like if I like this one, should I read this one? But yeah, I think it'll still be a lot of fun. I'm filming part 1 and part 2 back to back, so hopefully y'all enjoyed part 1. If not, you're getting this anyway. And I will probably film more after I kind of sit down and think more about it, and then I'll, you know, read through the comments and see if you guys agree with me or disagree with me, and to see if y'all have any suggestions for future episodes. Definitely leave down your recommendations for if you like this Stephen King book, then try this Stephen King novella. I would love to get to them, and if they're ones that I haven't already thought of, I will mention you in the video, and yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already. I also have the Bookastronomer Discord, where, like I mentioned previously, we're currently reading through The Bizarre Bad Dreams for the Stephen King Short Story Book Club. That's been a lot of fun. And yeah, Mile 81 is the first one. So like I said, if you like killer cars, check that out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a fantastic day.